Welcome, friends, to the next installment of our series on people who changed the world. Our guest in this episode is someone who changed the world not only with his scientific work, but also by shortening the bloodiest war in history. Yes, I'm talking about the Second World War. So, how can one person shorten a world war, especially if that person is not the head of a state? The answer is very simple. With his intelligence and determination to work. We can say that our guest today has prevented the deaths of millions more people by combining his intelligence and determination to work with mathematics and cryptology. Of course, we should not forget that he did this with a team. Our guest's name is Alan Turing. Although Turing was British, he was conceived in an Indian town because his father, Julius Turing, was working for the Indian Civil Service in India, which was then a British colony. When it was confirmed that his mother Sarah was pregnant, the Turing couple returned to their homeland by ship. Alan was born in a small private hospital in Paddington on June 23, 1912, 2 months after the sinking of the Titanic. He was an impressive child. His interest in numbers started in his early childhood. Although he had difficulty learning to read at first when he was young, he picked up a book called Reading Without Pain and learned to read on his own in 3 weeks. Throughout his life, he always preferred to solve his problems alone. When his parents returned to India, Alan was parented by another couple, so he missed his family a lot. This made him a withdrawn child by the time he was 9 years old. He was so fond of books that his parents complained about the situation. His handwriting was terrible. He was not good at subjects like Greek and Latin, but he was obsessed with math. He could solve problems instantly without even doing calculations. His prodigious talent was such that sometimes his teachers were baffled by his answers and thought Turing was cheating. He was always ahead of the curriculum. One of the important turning points in Turing's life was the death of his close friend and first love, Christopher Morcom. Morcom was a shaping factor in Turing's life, and they were both determined to solve the meaning of the world. But Morcom could not keep his promise. He died of tuberculosis. No one in Turing's life could replace Morcom. The death scarred Turing so much that it swept away his already doubting religious beliefs. For him, everything, including the workings of the human brain, was based on materialistic phenomena. In 1931, he qualified for King's College, Cambridge. He was determined to reach the top and fulfill the promise he and Morcom had made together. In his youth, Turing always acted on his own intuition before general rules. During his university years, he participated in anti-war movements, although not fervently. He could not be expected to be fervent anyway because he had a shy personality. Except for a few people he trusted, he became timid around others. He also had a stutter. Despite all these different characteristics, Turing, who discovered abstract mathematics, was adding success to his academic success. Friends. He graduated from the university with high honors. Thanks to a thesis on the central limit theorem, he was elected to the faculty of King's College in March 1935. He was only 22 years old. Turing was well and truly coming into his own in the mathematical debates of his time. He was particularly obsessed with a paradox called the decision problem. The decision problem had been proposed by David Hilbert in 1928 and asked whether there was a general algorithm that could decide whether any mathematical proposition was true or false using axioms. During that summer, when he was elected as a faculty member, Turing ran long-distance races. These runs helped him to think. One day, when he went jogging again, an idea came to him. What if there was a machine that could solve the decision-making problem? This idea, friends, was the first seed of what eventually became the computer. At the time, most accounting offices had calculators that could add, subtract, divide, and multiply. But for more complex calculations, only slide rules could be used. Weaving looms were important sources of inspiration for modern computers, because in weaving, punched cards were needed to inform the machine so that it could weave certain patterns. This is exactly the kind of system Turing envisioned, a machine that can perform a calculation or implement an algorithm. The following year, Turing published a paper. In it, he presented a theoretical machine. Surely human memory is limited, he wrote. At this stage, he did not imagine that a real, concrete machine could be built. In fact, Turing's goal was not to invent a computer at all. He was just working on an abstract problem underlying mathematics, and the computer emerged as a byproduct of this research. So the question Turing was thinking about was actually this: friends, what happens when certain operations in mathematics are performed following a simple set of rules? Working on this question, Turing realized that all computation has two dimensions: data and instructions telling us what to do with the data. This idea was the key to his mind. Turing had to find a way to make machines understand instruction such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division in the same way as humans. In other words, he had to translate such instructions into a language that machines could understand, ones and zeros. And he was able to do it with incredibly fluid logic. This series of instructions, which Turing laid the foundation for back then, continues to work in a device that we all have in our pockets today. The difference is that it has much more powerful processing power and memory than it did back then. This allows it to execute a much larger and larger number of instructions at the same time. In fact, today these pocket computers have become so powerful that they can do the work of a phone, a camera, a calculator, a typewriter, and a gramophone, and they are much lighter than all of them. A situation we often encounter in the history of science was also true for Turing. Very similar work was being done by another scientist. Alonzo Church, a mathematician from Princeton in the US, had written a paper on identifiability, a topic very close to Turing's computability. Newman, Turing's university professor, wrote to Church and asked if Turing could come to Princeton and work with him. So Turing went to Princeton in the USA in September 1936. It was a breathtaking time to be at Princeton. Albert Einstein was there. Turing was forced to attend parties and socialize here. It was a different world. Church helped Turing's career take off. Princeton was considered a success for Turing. The head of the department offered him a faculty position for $2,000 a year. Turing accepted the offer, but working with Church was not very satisfying. Also in 1938, war clouds were gathering over Europe because of the Sudeten crisis. Turing wanted to be at home. In the summer of 1939, the world was on the brink of war. Turing's interest in coding had reached the ears of Commander Alistair Denniston, the director of the British government's new School of Code and Cipher. Denniston brought together everyone from mathematicians to crossword puzzle experts with an interest or talent for coding. It was clear that Turing was an expert in this field. Now we have come to an important point, friends. The beginning of World War II, with Germany's invasion of Poland, the United Kingdom and France declared war on Germany. Karl Dönitz, Hitler's submarine fleet commander, developed the wolf trap tactic that inflicted heavy losses on Allied convoys in the first 3 years of the war. Germany's U-boats, or submarines, were the main actors in the Atlantic in World War II. According to the Treaty of Versailles, signed at the end of World War I, Germany's navy could have no more than 6 cruisers, 6 battleships, and 12 destroyers. But Germany did not abide by the treaty, and under Hitler built so many U-boats that it had the largest submarine fleet of the war. Even the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Winston Churchill, wrote in his diary, "The only thing that really scared me during the war was the U-boat danger," he wrote. And he was not wrong. In the early years of the war, German U-boats had sunk so many Allied ships that the United Kingdom was cut off from any logistical support from America and Canada. They were almost starving from the food supplies that were not reaching them. So how was it that the Germans alone managed to defeat 2 superpowers? What were their secrets? In fact, their success was hidden in a machine that was the brainchild of an engineer. All German messages, bombardments, surprise attacks, and torpedoes to be dropped were just radio signals floating in the air. Anyone with an AM radio could intercept these German commands and intercept them, but on one condition, on the condition that they could break the codes of the device designed by that engineer and called Enigma. This was not a simple thing at all. Possession of the device meant nothing when it came to breaking the codes. Enigma was a machine that resembled a typewriter with rotors inside that determined which letter would become which letter after each letter input. Enigma encrypted the messages sent in such a way that there were 15 billion times billion possible Enigma settings. The probability of guessing the key strings for a given message was akin to guessing the outcome of 26 simultaneous dice rolls. All the Allies had to do was try these possibilities one by one and find the right one. At best, it was a process that would take centuries. But they had less than 24 hours to find this encryption, because every 24 hours the Germans would change the Enigma's settings and a whole new 15 billion times billion possibilities would emerge. So the initial setup of the device, i.e. decoding an encrypted message without knowing the key, was impossible in a limited amount of time. But the Germans had no idea that they were about to meet one of the greatest cryptologists in history. Turing was recruited to the famous Bletchley Park in Milton Keynes, and his career as a codebreaker was well and truly underway. Bletchley Park was the base of the government cipher agency, and with the outbreak of the war, many mathematicians, logicians, and even chess masters began working there. By this time, the old methods of cryptography had been replaced by new ones, created by various machines. And since the encrypted messages created with these new machines could only be broken with mathematics, logic, and mechanization, Alan Turing was the indispensable name of this team. Turing knew that the human brain would not be enough to break an ingenious device like Enigma. He had to design a machine that could test billions of different possibilities in hours or even minutes and put the British ahead in the war. He wanted to start work immediately, but the British military was hesitant to allocate resources for such an unpredictable project. Turing was even accused of being a dreamer. But after much effort, he and Gordon Welchman, a mathematician, redesigned an electromechanical device called the bomb, first made in Poland, which made it easier to break Enigma codes. He designed it, but the machine was still slow in deciphering the Germans' secret codes. Since it was impossible to try so many possibilities in such a short time, they needed clues that could eliminate some possibilities. Perhaps they could exploit some literary feature of the German language, or some human error on the part of an encryption operator in the German army. For example, the fact that certain words were included at the beginning or end of each message as part of the military bureaucracy could have played a major role in breaking the cipher. The wind reverses. Yes, the brilliance of Alan Turing and his team, combined with the repetitive phrases of the German bureaucracy and some operator errors, friends, suddenly the wind had turned against them. Now Turing and his team knew every single German move, which U-boat would attack, where, how many people would die today, or how many ships would be sunk. They were able to crack the codes that everyone thought were unbreakable. And so came the beginning of the impending end. The British now had to make such ingenious moves that the Germans would not realize that their Enigma had been broken. Otherwise, they could immediately work on a new design and change the whole system. So for 2 years, the British decided who would live and who would die, which ships to sink and which German submarines to destroy, and made sure they lost the war. Sometimes they sacrificed their own soldiers and sometimes they defeated them. In the end, for 2 years, Nazi Germany thought that their Enigma was working like clockwork, but somehow their luck had run out. But it was only the brilliance of a brilliant mathematician that lost them the war. After the war ended, Eisenhower, the commander-in-chief of the Allied forces in Europe and later US president, said the war had been shortened by at least 2 years thanks to Bletchley Park. British officials said they came as close as 4 months closer to losing the war as food stopped flowing to the island from the sea at its worst. Alan Turing and his friends ended the war early thanks to their invention that prevented 14 million more people from dying. Alan Turing was awarded the Order of the British Empire after the war. From 1945 to 1947, he did important work at the National Physical Laboratory. On February 19, 1946, he presented the paper on the detailed design of the first program memory computer. The question I want to address is whether computers can think, he said, in an article he wrote in 1950, late in his short life, setting up the famous imitation game now called the Turing test. He wrote that computers might one day be able to think. From 1952 until his death in 1954, he worked on mathematical biology, especially morphogenesis. But his reputation with the state did not last long. He was a potential threat in the eyes of the government, perhaps because of the state secrets he knew. After an unfortunate incident, his life would start to go downhill. On January 23, 1952, Turing's house was broken into. The burglar who broke into his house was a man with whom he had a relationship several times. Turing reported the burglary to the police, and the investigation revealed that he was homosexual. He did not deny himself. Homosexuality was illegal in England at the time, and although it was considered a mental illness, it had criminal sanctions. They gave Turing two choices, my friends. Either he would go to jail or he would accept estrogen therapy, a method of chemical castration. In short, he would be chemically castrated. Of course, Turing chose the second option, but this treatment had side effects. He became alienated from himself. He became unable to do his work, unable to devote himself to anything. Since he was a criminal, it was impossible for him to travel abroad. He was also stripped of his credentials for secret government work, and his ongoing consultancy on cryptographic matters, which were top secret at the time, was terminated. It was a very difficult time for Turing. The year-long hormone treatment forced on him by the government made him very depressed and upset his whole balance. So he committed suicide on June 7, 1954. The housekeeper who came to his house the next day found him dead in his bed. An apple was found on her bedside table, from which she had taken a few bites. Reports said the apple was cyanide-laced, but for some reason he was never tested for cyanide poison. There was also no autopsy performed on her body. So you see, his suicide was suspicious. In 2013, Queen Elizabeth II granted Alan Turing a royal pardon, and today the most important award in computing, the Nobel Prize of the computer world, is named after him. The Turing Prize. Alan Turing was an important scientist. He accomplished many achievements in his short life. He made historic contributions to science and technology in areas such as computer science, artificial intelligence, and computability theories. He realized the first examples of the device that allows you to watch this video right now, so perhaps we should call him the founder of computer science. Turing's death has always been the subject of controversy, friends. After all, he was a man who knew how to crack codes that everyone thought were unsolvable after the war. He had deep knowledge of the attempts to break the Nazi codes on both sides of the Atlantic, which were kept top secret until the 1970s. Perhaps the Allies feared that his knowledge of these secrets might one day fall into the hands of their new future enemies. They worried about his betrayal or his weakness, so they chose to kill him or put pressure on him to commit suicide. We don't know, and perhaps we will never know. Is it him or humanity that needs to be forgiven? Is it him or humanity that needs to be forgiven?